All right, good evening and welcome everyone to a study session of the Historic Preservation Board. And I should explain, we are meeting on Thursday evening and beginning at 6:30. Normally we would have met on Monday. This meeting was scheduled for Monday. And
okay, so do I have my computer set up right? Could you confirm that for me?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. So are we live or is this thing working?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay.
We're live.
All right, so we were supposed to meet on this past Monday evening, but because of the storm and folks not being able to get in to the city to help us with this meeting, the study session and also the COA and public hearing that was scheduled for Monday night. The study session is taking place tonight, and the COA and public hearing for that COA will take place at our regularly scheduled meeting on April 19th. So, all right. Welcome everyone. I'm glad to see everyone. I hope we've had a few technical difficulties, but I hope they're all ironed out and we are here and ready to begin. This evening, we are looking at several things on our study session, and we'll start with our first agenda item, which is the proposed Downtown Historic District, discussion of historic integrity and contributing structures. And Andrea, would you care to start us, please?
I will. I'm going to share my screen and get the PowerPoint up.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, it doesn't want to show me the whole presentation. Well, hopefully you guys can see it all. I'm Andrea Mimnaugh. I'm a planner in the Department of Community Development. And tonight we're continuing the discussion on the Downtown Historic District application and all the work that's being done to gather information that will be part of that application that will be submitted to the city and eventually make its way to City Council for consideration of approval. So tonight we have Laura Gabriel and David Spratlin, Vice Chair and HPB Board Member, who are going to do most of the presentation, but I'm just going to kind of start it off right here. And so, as you've seen from the staff report, tonight's session involves an assignment for HPB members that you will do over the next month and that we will then look into and go over at the April meeting, the April 19th meeting. And so the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the assignment, make sure everyone knows what to do, and essentially get ready for that homework assignment. We think it's going to be really pretty interesting and helpful for everyone to have the work done themselves and to trade notes with everyone at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
Okay. I'm Laura Gabriel. I'm the vice chair of this committee, and I'm part of Group 2 with David Spratlin. As you know, the HPB was tasked by the City Council to review the boundaries of the Main Street Historic District. And in Group 1, which consisted of Rick and Chris, with the additional help of Andy and Kim, they worked on resurveying the area anticipated for the inclusion of the Downtown Historic District. This is the new map that was prepared by staff to show the survey areas. The pink section, the pink section is the existing Main Street Historic District boundary. The green area shows properties on Alamo that the council has identified as an area for inclusion in the new Downtown Historic District. And the blue area shows additional properties on Rapp Street that Rick and Chris felt were worthy of being considered as additional properties in the new downtown historic district. Next slide, please. So let me give you some background on our completed work, and I'm going to read you a couple paragraphs. Board members Rick and Chris, with the help of Kim and Andy, methodically resurveyed all the properties from the 1997 survey, and their work resulted in a final report titled the Integrity Survey Final Report. This report, which is included in your packet, describes the project, the methodology, and their recommendations for properties that merited more discussion. The results of the survey were set out in a spreadsheet, and the information included the building modifications, if a COA was issued, and a determination of integrity. And we hope to have all this information transferred to state survey forms in the near future. Using the survey spreadsheets, David and I separately reviewed all the properties and the resurvey spreadsheet. We were able to categorize most of the properties as either contributing or non-contributing based on the information provided, and most importantly, if the building was noted to still retain its integrity. And the key to all this, I think, is the word integrity. So when you're thinking about all this in the future, please refer to the National Register 101 sheet that you've got in your packet that shows the definition for integrity. It was decided that there are 14 properties that would benefit from discussions with the full board about whether the property meets the integrity standards and whether they should be categorized as contributing or non-contributing. And David will go into this further on another slide. Next slide, please. This is the map of the 14 properties, they're in blue, that will merit further discussion in our April meeting to determine if they are contributing or non-contributing. Please note that the properties are on the west end of downtown and they are designated in blue. Once you begin to look at these properties, you will see that they are a diverse group of buildings of various ages. You might want to take your spreadsheet and look at the background information on these properties, look at the definitions of integrity, and then go out and look at the buildings yourself. Next slide. So this is your homework. Your assignment, which is due in April, is to review the 14 properties on this list. All the property addresses are on the left-hand side of the of your slide. You're to decide whether the property has integrity and if it's in contributing. The packet contains a worksheet that looks like this slide. And if you see, the top property noted is the winner's circle. So that's one of the properties we're going to talk about. Using the information provided at the top of the spreadsheet, you'll evaluate each property and make your determinations. The highlighted area on the right in yellow is a workspace for your notes. And on the right, there's a section, an option for choosing whether this property has its historic integrity and if you think it's contributing or non-contributing. Next slide, please. So this slide is to clarify for you definitions for your use and give you additional information that you will need to review your spreadsheet. Please note that the period of significance that we are talking about is 1870 to 1970. Expect to review the attached documents, and there are a lot of attachments, and all of this will help you with your assessments. David will now give you a preview on how this exercise will work, so pay attention as he works through this first property on the worksheet. I turn it over to you, David.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
So with the period of significance, 1870 to 1970, just for clarification, what's the 1970 date? Like, why that specific date?
Laura, would you like me to take that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Well, this is the period of significance that was established in the downtown design guidelines a number of years ago. And so we're kind of going off of that. Okay. But I think that it would be well worth our while as part of this application development that we rediscuss it. Because I think we probably want to go a little beyond 1970 to capture a few more buildings downtown.
That's exactly
so
what
that's
I was
just
thinking.
kind of, yeah, that's kind of our number for right now, but we can as we go through the exercise and see what we have here, then we can say, you know what, it makes sense to change this up a bit.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was carved in stone, if it was kind of like this watershed date that something happened that we need to stick with it. So it's at this point, it's up for discussion as we go through this process.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize for the interruption. Andrea, would you be able to either press the full screen button at the bottom? It's we're getting feedback that the presentation's really difficult to read on the broadcast.
Okay, so which one is it here?
Well, there's a screen button either at the top or on the top orange bar, or there's a screen button at the very bottom, or you may be able to press Control F5 or F5 to make it full screen.
Okay, so F5 wants me to download something.
So if you just go 2 icons over from where you just clicked, I think you'll hit the presentation button.
Okay.
So over to your right, 2 more. Over again. 1 more.
No clicking is occurring.
Huh.
And here's one that enlarges it,
Well,
but
that
it
helps.
doesn't get rid of this over here.
How about at the top,
Like that.
top orange bar? There is a screen button next to the back circle arrow. Just there, that's it. No?
Nothing. Yeah, and I was trying from current slide and from the beginning. I've got slideshow clicked here.
Okay. Well,
So
maybe if it's enlarged like that,
helps out a bit.
it helps out a bit.
Yeah, so and I can enlarge this too, but not necessarily important to read this during the presentation.
Right.
It's more a demonstration of we've got some stuff in the worksheet for people to be able to refer to.
And this page is the first page of your homework assignment, basically.
Okay. All right.
Andrew, I think we could probably move on to the next slide. And luckily, a lot of my slides don't have too much text, so I think we should be okay on kind of zooming out like that. Perfect. Well, as Lori mentioned, we're going to go through kind of a brief example and kind of look about how we might apply some of these kind of homework assignments to a particular project. So this is just the first property on the worksheet. This is Jake's, as some of you may know it. It's the brown building located about in the middle of the block on Main Street. But other names of this building have been OG Hill Drugstore and the historic name, the Winter Circle. So we can go and move along to the next slide. And in terms of evaluating the integrity, if you recall, we've received a few examples of how to evaluate integrity. I think one of the better examples that we've received has been from board member Chris Geddes in her presentation at December's HPB meeting. So that might be something as well to dig up that presentation and re-review it as you're going through your homework here. So property, of course, need not to convey every aspect of the integrity to be determined it has integrity. Rather, these are just terms to be used in your evaluation. One thing I'll kind of share is an example that I remember from a Saving Places conference where there was a panelist discussion, and they, similar fashion, brought up a building. Is this historic? Is it a contributing, building per se? And I remember one, and I think we've heard this example in the past, way of thinking about it is if a person was transported from the period of significance to today, modern day, would they recognize this building? And to further kind of complicate this, the panelists had an example of a building that had some very modern additions to it. So there's a lot of controversy about materials, about the location because of, the additions there, the association and the design. But in all reality, they kept coming back to, a few aspects of the integrity, and one of them, which was some of the character defining elements of the historic structure still remained largely intact. And the modern edition was very separate and distinct from the historic building. So if you think about that first example about a person being transported from the period of significance to modern day, would they recognize the portion of the existing historic structure still? So I think that's just something to keep in mind as you're going through this. You can go to the next slide, please. All right, so we can kind of look at this a little bit further here. So we know from the original survey and the recent resurvey that this building was built around 1886. It was originally located on Rapp Street and then moved in the 1900s to its present day location. Photographs did indicate that the building gained this false front around 1911, and then the parapet, as we see now, was in place around 1927. And clearly at some point also since then, the building was modified at a later point, perhaps sometime in the 40s or 50s even, with a modern kind of storefront design was replaced by an angled entrance. So I think in that own respect, its historical significance in its own rights of a different period of significance here. I think that's something to consider when you're going through your homework as well. So the survey indicates the building is significant for architecture and historical significance. To reiterate, it represents a type, a period, or method of construction. Its association with significant patterns of development and contributes towards a historic district. So now that we can go through the integrity portions and the list that you see there on the right. So I'll kind of open this up a little bit and maybe we can pick some topics and get a few input from some of the other board members if you'd like. So let's just talk about location first of all. Does anyone have any thoughts on how location might apply to this particular building? Maybe I'll just start selecting someone on random here.
When was it moved again?
It was moved around 1900s, the early 1900s. It might have been 1900 actually. It's been in this
location for a long time. It's probably been in this location longer than it was in the original location.
Correct, yes.
And it's been in this location during the period.
Less than 20 years.
Okay, and it's been in this location during the period of significance.
Correct.
So I think we're okay with location, in my opinion.
I think you're correct, and I think it's within the historic district, so it checks that box as well. It's a center of commercial activity within the city of Littleton. I think that was a very good analysis there. So feeling, anyone want to take on this aspect? I think when you think about this, think about its kind of context as well. It kind of relates a little bit to setting, but how does this context with the rest of maybe the block fit in?
To me, feeling is kind of hard. I mean, don't we all have our own personal feelings? So anyone that has a good idea about how to evaluate feeling.
I think that's the squishiest one of these that kind of makes everybody uncomfortable. But yeah, I agree.
I think those are two very keen points. It is a very subjective aspect here. I related a lot to the setting as well, because I think the setting has a big impact on its feeling. Does it feel historic? Does it feel, have some of those kind of undescribable features?
I have a question. Does the fact that the use of the building is similar today as it was during the earlier period of significance, does that contribute to feeling, or is it unrelated?
I'll let anyone else jump in on this as well, but my personal feeling is I don't think it is necessarily a defining criteria.
Association.
I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
That would be association. But if we look at if we look at the definition of feeling from the National Register, to have the aspect of feeling, a candidate must have surviving physical features that express its historic character and help the visitor experience an awareness of its history and importance. So this building has not changed basically since the 1940s.
And I think go ahead.
it looks out of place with some of the other architecture, but the building by itself hasn't really changed much since the 1940s.
That's very good.
Good point.
And I think the other thing you kind of think about that is how it does pull in all the other, pieces of some of the other aspects as well into that criteria or into that aspect. So we'll move on to setting. It is in an area of historic buildings. I think besides that, that's probably really the primary context, is that it does have other historic buildings within its proximity. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add to that, but this one I kind of felt was a pretty low-hanging fruit one.
What's the building on the left? I'm trying to picture it from.
That is, it's known as the ancient healing art now, and it was where the pottery, Two Potters was, and it was originally the meat store.
Lemke's Meat Market.
Lemke's, yeah, Lemke's Market.
Okay.
We could go back 2 slides and we have the street view, if that's helpful.
I was gonna say, because I think settings impacted a little bit by that kind of what's dwarfing it on the left. Like that setback on, like when you look at the building next door to it, it's 1 story, but then it's got an upper story. Granted, it's set back, but from the street, it probably, has a better sense of feeling with the setting.
Yeah, it does. When you're on that side of the street, it absolutely feels, that these are just 1-story structures.
Yeah.
Across the street, you can
Yeah.
see the addition onto ancient arts, but it feels very appropriate to its setting. It really fits in. It feels like it's been there for over 100 years, and it has.
And it has.
Yeah, exactly. I think that facade, along with the building to the left, helped create that street presence and that frontage. It also has a little bit different impact when you're further back, but that's why I think some of our codes and some of the other historic kind of regulations require those kind of setbacks for different additions or remodels.
Yeah.
Well, the design guidelines require a setback on additions. Now, what you can't see from Main Street on Jake's, but you can see when you go in the alley, is the original roof pitch. And when you see the original roof pitch, it's very clear it's been there for over 100 years. It's like maybe a 5 to 12 pitch, very steep. Typical of that period at that time.
Yeah.
So is it a gable roof, Rick? And this is a
gable roof. Yeah.
So this is a false front.
Yes.
Okay.
And the front has been there for quite a while.
Am I confusing this with something else? But was this the original? Was its original use as a livery stable? Okay, I am confusing it.
No, this was the original drugstore.
Yeah, sorry about that. I stand corrected. I've told many people that, so.
Well, perfect. I think we can move on then to design. I think this is always the fun one, I think, when you're thinking about some of the integrity parts of it. And so again, I'll open it up and see if anyone has any comments or thoughts on how design aspect applies to the integrity of this particular building.
Can I just ask a question? What year is the photo on the left from?
1997.
Thanks.
I'll jump in on a few things here. Maybe we can talk about materials, maybe talk about the form a little bit, and give some of those cues out there.
I mean, overall, I feel like trying to think of how to say this, like it does retain integrity. Certainly there have been some changes, and I think, this is something that I've mentioned multiple times is that, commercial buildings probably have the most changes of any building, because every time a new tenant comes in, they tweak the building to meet their current needs. So, the stepped parapet is still intact. The window has been altered, like underneath where it says Jake's Beer Garden.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's more of a modern window, but that recessed entry is still there.
So let me interrupt you there too, Chris. Is how do you feel about that stepped entry? Since that was something added at a later time, do you feel that still retains its integrity?
I guess, if I'm looking at this, as far as we're headed towards contributing versus non-contributing status, one of the things I would want to see is if there are any earlier photos of this, or to know when that change occurred as far as kind of that recessed entry. I mean, a recessed entry is very typical on a commercial building. Obviously the door's been changed, the windows have been changed out. They're larger now than they were before. So I'd probably want just a little bit more information, but contributing and non-contributing status is different than something being individually eligible. So I feel like there's a little bit lower threshold for contributing and non-contributing than there would be if we were going to individually look at this for National Register or for local landmark status.
Can I ask a question real quick? Rick and Chris, when you guys did your resurvey form under integrity, you said this property had lost its integrity, and Andrea thought maybe today that was a mistake. It was put in the wrong column. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, I made a mistake.
Okay.
Now, one thing about the stepped entrance, which you have to be aware of, in the 1940s, that was a brand new architectural style created for the commercial industry, and started in Miami by Morris Lapidus. He created the first step increase, and it was to draw people into their building.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was done very, very early, probably in the 1940s, because the use of this building has been a restaurant since the 1940s of some sort, a bar or a restaurant, continuous with no breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that this is probably 1940s. I would not say it's 1950s, it's 1940s probably. And again, as far as this building's lifetime, especially in its current location, most of its life, this has been its front. It has had the recessed entry. And also it really, it speaks to an important period in Littleton's history when they were putting these kinds of modern storefronts on their buildings to revitalize their downtown and revitalize their these structures. And they were doing it as early as the 1940s. And so it does tell, it's one building that tells an important story in Littleton's, or an important piece of Littleton's story. So.
Absolutely. I think everyone hit it on the head on this one. I think from my own 2 cents here as well, is it maintains and retains its, some of the character defining features with that step parapet, that Chris had mentioned. And in its own right, the recessed entry, as Rick had mentioned, is significant in its own time period as well. So this is a good example of how, even from different periods, it's still within the period of significance, they can both be contributing there.
Exactly. And I was just going to say that, David, that if these changes occurred during the period of significance, then they're part of the evolution of the building. It's not like this was done 3 years ago. Like we're talking about these changes occurring during the period of significance.
Yeah, and I think that's a hard thing that gets missed a lot when certain people talk about historic preservation. Is it's not just about freezing something back in time at a certain period, but honoring its evolution over time and its those character defining elements for sure.
So as
Perfect.
I recall, there is a historical, older photograph of this building in the Downtown Design Standards and Guidelines, a nice black and white, although it is, it's an oblique, a severely oblique photo. just barely able to see that the storefront was flush with the parapet there and that it was a metal storefront frame.
Be good to check out. Thank you, Andrew. So the next one, association. I think we've kind of touched on this a few times, but it is associated, and Rick mentioned this as well earlier, with the development along Main Street, and it's kind of context of the bigger picture of that block. Materials, I think this is an easy one as well, but I'll throw it out there if anyone wants to talk about that a little bit. I don't know if you can see in the picture, but if you look closely, you can tell most of that store or most of that facade is brick. The last one here is workmanship. Unless anyone else has something to add to that, I'll just mention that there's probably nothing exceptional here about fine, craft in here. There is some, but it's probably not as a good example as others that we have in Littleton. I'll put it that way. I think in all, there's probably 2 or 3 of these elements that are pretty strong, and in my opinion, I think that makes this a contributing property. And I think Rick and Chris had mentioned that as well in their recent survey updates as well.
Well, and I think this might be a good time to reiterate the fact that, you don't always have to have all 7 aspects. And depending on what, the district is significant for, certain ones will carry more weight. And the article that was included from Louisiana with the, talking about applying the 7 aspects of integrity, depending on what a property is significant for or a district is significant for, will kind of lend weight to more than others.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Chris. Andrew, unless you have more to add to this, I think we're ready for the next slide.
One more thing on this particular building, because it was a mistake that I thought it didn't have integrity. It is a contributing building to the National Register district.
Mhm.
So it's a higher level than even a local district designation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it's a good one to start with.
One of the oldest buildings on Main Street, right?
It is the oldest building, but not the oldest in its current location.
Yeah. All right. Well, just to kind of wrap this up and summarize it, at next month's regular HPB meeting, the board will go through each of these 14 properties one by one. And through those discussions, I think we'll land on determining the integrity on the contributing properties.
There's one more building we have to add that was missed on all the surveys before. Let me get to it. It's at the one on Curtis Street. 5739 Curtis. And if I can share my screen, can I do that?
Yeah, if you just go to the bottom where it says share screen.
Let's see if it's still there. Whiteboard. Oh, maybe I lost it.
Is it on the resurvey form, Rick?
It's not on it. It's never
Okay.
been surveyed.
Okay.
I had it up on Google Maps. I must have deleted it. Anyway,
What's the address again?
it's 5739 South Curtis. And I wanted to show the picture of it. The reason it never was surveyed is because it's associated with 23. It's the one right next to Penny's. The one that's right next to Penny's.
Oh, around Lee Turner. Okay.
I'll share my screen.
Here,
I've got
I
it
was
up
saying-
here.
I was gonna say, I've got it too. Okay.
Let me get, how do I get, oh, okay, get rid of this. There, okay. There, this building was never surveyed for some reason as an individual building because it's attached to, It's attached to the second building down on Main Street. You got Penny Robbins, and then you have where the hair cutter building is, right? The Main Street Cutters. That building and this building are tied together in the survey form for some reason.
Because they're not attached at all.
They are attached, actually. They're
How are
attached.
they
It's,
attached?
it's attached to 5729
It's,
Curtis
it's,
Street, the yoga place.
let's see.
Pretty sure we took
There, you
pictures
can
of
see
this
the
though.
attachment back there. This is
Where-
Penny Robbins, and then there's an attachment back here that goes to Main Street. So these buildings are attached.
Yeah, you can see from the satellite view that they're one.
Okay.
Okay, wow.
Now,
Interesting.
I
we
feel
should
like
probably
Andy and I took pictures of this though, when we went out.
did you? Because there's no form anywhere, so we need to have the form.
Yeah, it's not on the survey.
No. So we need to have a survey form for it, but this building was built in 1921. And
Do
it's
we know what-
associated, I mean, it's a car dealership building
Ah.
associated with the other one, which is a car dealership. This one is probably has, it is in better architectural shape. I won't say physical shape, but it's better architectural shape than the other buildings. There's very nice bow trusses on the inside of this. They're exposed.
Rick?
Yep.
Is this something like when we get the survey software up and running that we should go survey, or do you want it surveyed before then?
Well, it needs to probably be discussed within our district now. So we should survey it before.
I mean, I'm willing to go survey it or fill out a form, you know, just to have some kind of paper trail for it.
Yeah, Andrea?
Yeah, I would guess I'd suggest that for this one, perhaps one of the two of you, or maybe two of you working together, can put a little presentation together on this one, and we can do similarly to what we just did with the example that David went through with us for this last one. Does that sound all right?
I'm game.
Okay.
Is it attached to 2609 West Main Street where the Skelly service station was? Is that what it's attached to?
No, not Scully.
Okay.
It's
Oh,
on the
Main
other
Street.
side of the street.
The historic name of the building is his Main Street Cutters. So if you go down to second building down, right there, it's attached to that building.
Okay.
So it's an
This
L
one
shape.
here.
It's an L-shaped building.
Okay.
Very early is all automobile. According to the survey form that was done in 97, is all automobile.
Okay, so it's
oriented.
attached to 2630 West Main Street.
Interesting.
Of all the survey forms, I don't know why they didn't consider that a separate building, but they didn't in 97.
Okay. So we'll have that as an add-on to next month's. And then I'd also like to say that we had intended to include the view house in the worksheet that you have. And I've said there are 14.
It's on there.
Oh, it is on there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're good on that.
So quick question on that building that Rick was just mentioning. 2630 West Main is on the list of things that we're supposed to look at. But we want to consider 5739 as separate from it.
Yeah, I think you probably should.
It has a different address.
Yeah, I mean, it looks totally different too.
Yeah, it's everything's different.
And the date of
guess-
construction on the one on Curtis is,
1921.
okay,
You
and this
could-
one is circa 1910 for the one on Main Street, so.
You could think of
Okay.
it this way, all the buildings on Main Street touch each other, and this one just touches in a different sort of a way.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Chris, you didn't get a volunteer with you to look at this building.
I volunteer.
Oh, did you?
I
Okay.
would, unless you want to, Rick.
I'll let you do it, Kim.
Um, And I'd like to say that, we need to be cognizant of the sunshine rules. And so the idea is pretty much that you work on your own. If you want to call one other board member to say, hey, what are you thinking about such and such, and have a discussion, that works within the rules. But we can't have anything greater than 2 board members talking about it together at one time.
This
This is a reminder.
This one might be a little example you could use the historic Denver software for, Chris. What do you think?
Well,
For
I
one
don't know where
building.
we're at with that.
Well, just on your machine, if you could.
Oh, well, I don't, I mean, the property has to be loaded into the tablet.
Oh,
I can't just randomly take pictures and
okay.
dump it into a form. It has to be preloaded. That's why I was asking, like for a paper trail, like, do you want an actual form filled out, or kind of like an electronic version of the 1403 filled out on it, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, eventually, I think, we're going to want paper copies of it, and I will check in and see what the status is of our new software and see where we can get by April meeting.
Chris, could you just print a blank form out?
And fill it out?
And just hand fill it, and then we can scan. At least we'd have the inventory form for later.
Sure.
But it'd be a good way to practice using that software.
I already know how to use the software.
Well, you know how to, we don't.
It's easy. It's easy, I promise you. But that's why I was asking, like, do you want a hard copy? Like, I'll just print out a 1403 and fill it out. I encoded 15,000 of them. I can certainly fill one out.
We should have a hard copy and have it up on the website with the rest of the downtown district.
Okay.
Documents.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay.
And Chris, I'll get with you and just get a time that we might be able to go together. Just
okay.
Whatever your schedule's like. So we can work together if we want to go in pairs, or if we want to, so we can work together if we want to go in pairs. Here's another question. If we want to, contact other board members one-on-one and ask about a specific building, we can do that as well, can't we?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. All right, is there more to this presentation, or are we finished with this first presentation?
Well, I'll just say, also feel free to call me as well if you have questions on how to complete the assignment.
Okay, and the assignment is due at our April 19 board meeting.
That's right, bring your worksheets.
So Andrea, could we get the Word copy of the worksheet so we can type in our responses?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that would, and you want us to actually type and enter it onto the document live, is that right?
Well, I'd rather just have my own type. I'd rather type it in because then I can read I can read it better than even my own writing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
We're not submitting this in ahead of time. It's just you make your notes on your own form, and then we bring it to the meeting and we're able to discuss it.
Yes, for discussion purposes. Yeah.
Okay. It's just to help us get all the information you guys want so that we can have a good discussion.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Well, I would just like to say, what a surprising and imaginative and fun way to approach this project, Laura and David. This is really cool, and now I'm super excited and anticipating our next meeting to have this discussion. But this is wonderful. Thank you so much for this work. And if anyone has questions, I'm sure they'll be asking one of you or Andrea as we go into the next month. So yeah, this is really cool. Thanks, guys. Very
good job.
Just a neat job on this. Okay, if there are, does anyone have any other questions?
I was just
Good
going to
job.
say thank you to Andrea as well for all the hard work and putting together the presentation and helping with this process.
Yes, you did an awesome job, Andrea.
She does a great job.
Yeah, as always, I must say. But yeah, this was really fun. Thank you. This is really neat, and I'm anticipating another wonderful discussion next month. All right, so if we are ready to move on, are we ready to move on, everyone? Nobody has any other questions or comments? Then we will move on to topic B, which is review of the 2021 Main Street Grant Program. And throwing it back to you, Andrea.
Okay, so as you recall, the grant program was on hold last year due to budgetary concerns with the city, but we're back on for this year. And so I have received a lot of interest from property owners, and they're really excited to get going on it. And typically what we do every year is have the board say, you know, we like such and such about the program, but maybe we should tweak this or tweak that. And we had done that for the 2020 program. And if you recall, some of the changes we made were clarifying some of the language as to what actually was, what was actually a grant program that could be a grant project that could be funded or not funded. And then we also said, you know, we're not necessarily going to be giving out 80% of cost to each person, and that it's gone down to 50%. For some projects, it's gone down to 20%. And the only people now that can get 80% are people that have opted into the district within the last 24 months. And they still have an opportunity to get that 80% reimbursement. So we haven't been through a grant round with these new rules on it. And we're certainly up to tweaking more if you have ideas that you want to share tonight. And we'll get to that, your ideas in a minute, but I just want to bring up this other piece, and that is kind of some exciting news. I've been talking with the communications department, and we're going to be putting a lot of the program now online. We're getting up to speed with the rest of the world and not sending out that big brochure that everyone said was too wordy and too long. So what the plan is, you know, assuming everyone on the board is good with it, is that we would send out a two-sided 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that's going to announce the grant program and give some deadlines and some really basic information, and direct people to the website to get more information. And that's where they can fill out an application online, a fillable application, and the rest of the forms, and upload the other documents that they need to. Yeah.
That's great. That'll be a good time saver for you guys, for staff, right?
Yeah, it will be.
Not having been through the process before with you guys. So when you say you're gonna, this 8.5 by 11, like, is that still a mailing that goes out to people?
Yes. So typically we've mailed out the whole thing to everyone in the historic district and all the properties that could opt in, to entice them to opt in. And this time we're gonna send it, just that two-sided flyer, out also to people who are in the what may be the new boundary of the downtown historic district.
So this 8.5 by 11 flyer, is it, you just said like the previous thing was very wordy, and like, is this a slimmed down version? I'm just wondering, like, could it be a postcard to make it easier to send out, or something on Littleton Online, or I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it could be something like a postcard, and I wonder if that might be better, you know. Well, I know my fridge doesn't, magnets don't work anymore on it. So, I mean, I used to put things on my fridge like that, right?
I'm thinking, like, if you were saying it's too wordy, like shorter is, you know, is, and sweet, you know, to the point.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so maybe just a postcard that goes out, and obviously something kind of that grabs their attention, that there's financial incentives. People always respond when there's money involved, especially if it's helping them offset costs on their building.
Yeah. What does everyone else think? Postcard is maybe the better way to go?
Well, a question about that. Chris, I like your idea, less is more. Andrea, would it be accurate to say that most of the folks who would be receiving it are people who own or are in properties downtown, and that they have an awareness of this program? They know that the grant program exists?
Yes, but this will be the first year that we send notice to property owners on Alamo.
Okay, so, it's not an out of the blue brand new thing that nobody's ever had any idea about. So, just, something shorter and sweeter that does basically say, you have an historic property that may be eligible for this money. And that's the kind of thing that could push them to find out a little bit more. So I think you can do that with the right push.
Okay.
So that's my thought. Anyone else?
I'm just wondering if it would save some costs too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just looking for ways to save a little bit,
Mhm.
given the current economic situation with COVID and stuff.
Well, it'll save money, both in materials to print it and to mail it. It'll save design costs and the resources of putting this together. That, and it'll save time too, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But the key is, there's the old saying, when you have somebody in front of you, you never want to send them to your website. But as long as it's powerful, and it says, this is the grant program that you've all been waiting for, and just go here and apply, and make sure that it's really the rules and the application process is very, very clear when they go online, and it's not too cumbersome.
Well, and that brings me to the next point. And typically what we've always done is brought back the revised brochure and application form for the board to review the changes. But given time constraints this year with all the projects we have going on, our project will go out in the mail a little bit too late in the game. So I've talked with Kim about this, and we thought that having her as chair and one other board member review the final product before we send it out, just to make sure it's how the board wants it, and just another set of eyes to make sure it's clear, would be good, if the board is good with that process. That a little different from before.
I think that's
Okay with
good.
it.
Okay. All right.
Andrew, I have a question about the grant program. It's tied to downtown, right? Is there any way that it can be expanded to other eligible buildings? I'm thinking Littleton Boulevard eventually.
Right. So it's in the code right now what properties are eligible. So for now, at least, we have to stick with what we've had as eligible buildings. And then, if we move forward with the ULUC and the Downtown Historic District and start looking at benefits to being in the district again and to Littleton Boulevard, that might be a good time sometime next year, starting to ask council, hey, what about extending this up Littleton Boulevard?
Yes, okay. I would like to propose a change to this, but not for this year. Right now, routine maintenance is not permitted under this code, but it's routine maintenance that saves the buildings. When you don't do routine maintenance, then you're replacing deteriorated items. So people don't do routine maintenance. So I like to see a modification
And then you have loss of historic fabric.
Right. It's just, if you don't maintain it, you lose it. So it's the cheapest way to preserve our buildings. And I would like everybody just to think about us adding on the ability to do routine maintenance on these buildings to preserve them. There would be a caveat though. People need to have an approved maintenance plan that identifies what the routine maintenance is so that it's scheduled and it can be done. And I also wouldn't fund it at 100%. I'd fund it 50% or whatever, because you're supposed to maintain your properties anyway. That way we would end up saving.
Well, we have to,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there has to be buy-in on the owner's part. Like, we can't just give them money and, like, they need to be invested in it as much as we are.
Well, I think most people are invested in their property. They either maintain it or they let it go to hell and they sell it. But if we're going to preserve the buildings, maintenance is a way to save them. And to say in this grant program, if the buildings are all to a maintainable standard and we're not doing major restoration work, the program saves more money over the long run as well. But we have to kind of carefully craft it and determine what is a routine maintenance plan. And there's a lot of them out there. I've designed many of them over the years, trying to do getting the Park Service to do maintenance. Nobody wants to do maintenance. It's just a fact of life. No one will do it. They wait for the project. So it's just something to think about in terms of getting people to think differently about their property and how to reduce long-term costs.
Okay.
It would save a lot of window replacement, believe me.
Yeah, we've authorized grants for tuck pointing. Would that be restoration or maintenance? Because you do have to maintain brick, especially in this environment.
I don't view tuck pointing as routine maintenance because it's once every couple of decades.
Okay.
Routine maintenance is something that you do. Cleaning the gutters every year is routine maintenance to keep the drains from plugging up, water going down the side of the building, and then eroding all the mortar and the brick, so you have to tuck point it. So it's just something to think about. I have lots of examples of what this is. I've worked on it my whole life in the Park Service. So if we can get people to buy into that, then we'd have a much better looking street. All our buildings would be in much better shape. So.
Yes, Chris.
I have a question not related to what Rick just talked about, but in looking at the document that was included, and it has the deadlines for last year.
Yeah.
It talks about how stuff is mailed out in March of 2020, and then there's pre-application meetings with the staff, March and April, and then an application deadline in May. Like, is that still reasonable given the fact that we're just talking about this now and we haven't, like, if there's changes that need to be made before this postcard goes out and stuff, like, is there talk of maybe just doing one round this year because of how, like, just the July deadline instead of two?
Yeah, I thought that one round would make a lot of sense. Doing 2 rounds in a year is pretty taxing on staff. And I think it's also not necessarily great for the program either, because round 1 grant recipients have to get their paperwork and their projects in, and they're so fast so that we know how much money do we actually have for round 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that it was just really rushing people. So I would advocate for 1 grant round this year, but we do need to get it out as soon as possible. And I already have communications looking at it, and they're asking questions. And so I do think that we can get it out first week of April and stay on schedule and get this to the HP board for consideration of applications at the June meeting.
I like the idea of just 1 round. It just seemed a little rushed, and like you said, kind of seeing how much money you have for round 2, and if somebody couldn't get their act together and they apply for July and there's so little money.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay.
Well, just from a timing perspective, if it is alarmingly late in March already, and if we want to get this out in early April, everyone needs to review how the current program works. really in the next week and get comments in as far as, you know, what do you like? What don't you like? What would you like to see added? Is that right? We need to be doing that really within the next week?
Well, typically what we do is actually people throw out their comments at this meeting because you've had it in your packet to take a look at. You know, to me, the board did look at it last year and there were some good tweaks made, I thought. And I thought that the board was actually pretty pleased with how it came out. So I'm not entirely sure.
Was that the previous year that we didn't do this last year in
ago.
2020?
It was 2 years ago, yeah.
Gotcha, yeah.
Well, no, no. Actually, I'm sorry. It was last year, and the
February,
program
right?
was actually mailed out. And then I had to sent out a letter and said, I'm sorry that we had to put the program on hold.
Ah, okay. Last year's a blur, so thanks.
Yeah.
Last
me
year
too.
is lost. I would like to make a suggestion, since we are reevaluating the historic district. If we change the boundaries and buildings are incorporated in the district in a different way, then the parameters around this program changes. So I would suggest right now for the rest of this year, to stay with the way the program's designed, and then we look at it next year.
I agree.
That's what I was
After we
gonna
have
suggest.
all the
Exactly,
work done on
same.
historic district.
As I say, there's a couple of typos in there, like let's just clean it up to have it ready to go as
Yeah.
quickly as possible. And then Rick, you already had your suggestion about, you know, making some other changes, and that might make sense once all of the planning and the HP
Not now,
code and
later.
everything is all updated. Yeah.
Can I throw out another recommendation? I would say I would recommend that this year you keep your 2 cycles. With all the state and federal stimulus money that's going to be coming out, I would love to see the Preservation Board fight for some of that stimulus money to give to businesses for this program, rather than just putting it in the traditional business recovery support program. Like, I think there's going to be enough money. You can do both. The city can do both those programs. They can do the traditional, you know, business recovery program that I believe the city's already done for COVID, and then ask for some more money to just match or leverage these funds and do more. In fact, to Rick's point, maybe you do allow maintenance at a lower rate, just because of the fact that you might be able to get more money than you probably ever will this year.
Mhm.
That's a
Is
great
it just
idea.
this year, Andy?
What's that?
This fiscal year?
Yeah, we're looking at proposals right now, state and federal, that could be millions of dollars to communities around the state for this kind of stuff.
Does it have to be obligated this year or next year?
It might be able to, yeah, we're hoping for 2 years, but Polis keeps saying 18 months. He wants it to stimulate the economy. So faster is better, but I think everyone understands that it's going to take a couple years to make a dent in a stimulus effort.
Especially if it's construction. You just can't go that fast. It's just not going to happen.
Right, but some of these projects you can get done.
Some of these we could, yeah.
Some.
I like the idea, Andy. I'm just wondering, like from Andrea's perspective, where she said it's already challenging enough for staff to manage it. You know,
Yeah, well,
like,
you
what
ask for
what does that
money to
mean for
hire more
you,
staff.
Andrea?
But
Well-
you can ask for a percentage for hiring temporary staff to run it.
Ah,
Oh. Okay, you know what? Hey, Mike, how about you and I look into this and we'll see what we can do to possibly enhance the program this year.
That sounds like a great idea.
Okay, and we will report back on what we're able to do, but thank you very much, Andy. I would have never thought of that.
No,
Yeah,
it's
that's
really
a
good.
great idea.
And Andy, I have personal experience with this in 2009 with ARA.
Yeah,
where
same,
We
I'm
got
still
millions
recovering.
of dollars to spend right away. It was not easy. It's just not easy to do that. But you have to kind of weigh the
true.
the easy projects, Andrea. If there's some really easy projects, it would be really good.
Okay.
And just, you know, when you were talking about construction and stuff like that, one of the things that's happening right now is that if anybody's tried to get a bid on construction in the past, you know, several months, you know, people are busy, busy, busy. It's going to be really hard to get projects, you know, bid, let alone started and completed. So I think we have to be mindful of that. And also building materials have skyrocketed. There's lumber shortages, and that means more expensive. This is not the year to redo your deck, put it that way. I think, you know, we can anticipate some crunches along those lines.
So I just have a question on that in regards to that, Kim, to Andy. Can this be used for design work, Andy? Because
I think so. It will depend on how the programs get approved through the state legislature.
Because design work leads to the future anyway, but at least it doesn't get involved with all the material issues that we have right now. So we can maybe, right, you know, so maybe there's someone wants to do restoration on their property, they get the design done this year and be ready to go for the future.
Good point.
Yeah, and make sure that that falls within the guidelines of the program.
Design work, yes, it is.
Looks like it does, yeah.
There's several buildings on Main Street that could use some design right now and planning for a restoration.
Does anybody know an architect?
I know one. He's in the middle of the screen.
We could probably, you know, kind of sell that design work because it doesn't involve getting bids. It's an easier project to put together. You know, people can get kind of interested about it, say, oh, wow, I can get this money to see what the building can look like. I could see that actually going pretty well.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, getting some kind of idea of what it might cost and how much, like if, you know, like if they need to do it in phases and if they need to be looking at other sources to fund the project once they're ready to go. So there's a lot of benefits to the planning side of things before they get going.
Right.
Okay. Are there other comments about, you know, basically the gist of the program? And then we'll move on to exactly, you know, what's the deliverable, what is the timing and all of that stuff. So are there further comments on the content of the program itself?
Yeah. It's been working for a long time, pretty well.
What's that?
It's been working for a long time, pretty well.
Yes. And, you know, speaking personally, I don't want anything to do with the design of the postcard itself. And I'm happy to work with you on it. And maybe I speak for the board, but I don't know. What I'm mostly interested in is the content of the project. I'm going to leave it to the professional designers to actually come up with a compelling postcard, if that's what we choose to do, or, you know, it's a fold over or a little brochure or something like that. But I will be happy to work with you and review it in any way that, you know, and if there's anyone else from the board that would like to participate in this also.
I have a question.
Yes.
Andrea, what exactly do you want us to do? Like, do you want us to design the postcard, or are you just wanting to make sure the content is spot on?
Yeah, so we've got a really pretty good marketing team right now. And so I've got both the marketing team and a graphic designer on this project. And so they were the ones that I said, hey, what do you think we could do with this brochure? I get comments that it's wordy. And I also didn't like the question and answer format that went on for pages and pages. And I just immediately got back some just great ideas on how to reformat it and bringing it onto the web and doing this, you know, brochure that got sent out instead, this, you know, smaller piece. And so what I'm looking for is 2 board members to just kind of check it out before we send it out. Because normally we've always brought the whole thing back to the board to take one look before it goes out into the mail to everyone. So this year, I thought, well, let's just have 2 board members. We can do it outside of the meeting, and just as a check to make sure, because it's kind of the board's program. It's not really staff's, to make sure this is what we want. And if you guys want to just do the online pages and leave the postcard up to staff, that I'm fine with that, whatever you guys want to do.
Andrea, I'm happy to help review it. This is kind of what I do for my job, so.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So it'll be Kim and Lisa.
Okay,
So
that's good.
So they
I was
are
going to
working.
volunteer if nobody else did. So thank you, Lisa.
So they're working on it. They're actively working on it now. So I will get with them and see what kind of a time frame we'll have something to send out to the 2 of you.
Okay, that's great. And if the rest of the board is okay with this, because we've done things, in the past where it's basically been designed by the board. And, personally, I don't think that produces the best product.
Designed by individuals better.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this sounds like a plan. Lisa and I will kind of look at it with Andrea, and we'll certainly run it past everybody, but the plan is to get this out. When do you actually want to get it in the mail, if that's what we do?
Well, I guess we have to kind of see, how we're doing with the communications department, but I'm hoping first week of April it's out. So when I send it to you and Lisa, to the 2 of you, hopefully I'll have a date in advance and say, hey, you're going to get this, and you'll have whatever 2-3 days to review it and get any comments back, and then the staff will have time to work through any suggestions or corrections that you may find.
And that'll be basically within the next 10 days. So just from a scheduling point of view, Lisa, you and I will have to bear that in mind to be available. All right. Well, is there any other discussion on this? All right. Let me get glasses so I can see where we're going next. Okay. We're on to agenda item C, which is discussion on updating the draft historic preservation code with a provision for the Littleton legacy list and other items. So again, back to you, Andrea.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, do you see this text here?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sorry, this is again small. The first thing that we're going to do is take a look at the Littleton legacy list ideas for putting into the code. And as you recall, we used to have the list of merit. And those of you that have been on the board longer may possibly remember that there was a paragraph in the code about it, and it was taken out. And so now we've had our cooling off period. And as we get back into it, we want something back in the code. And so what we're thinking is that we'll write something up that includes the purpose that was included in the resolution that the board passed back in 2019. A copy of that was put in your packet for review, and that we can draft up the language. And you may know that I am working directly with Kending Keast Collaborative, our consultants on the ULUC, to help put the Historic Preservation Code together. And so essentially just wanted to make sure that you're good with what the idea behind the Littleton legacy list is for inclusion in the code.
Well, I have a couple questions about it.
Yes, Rick.
So I don't have any, what's been presented is fine, as far as I'm concerned, because it was approved by the last board a year and a half ago. But my question of putting this into the ULUC, if we put the legacy list in the ULUC, are we going to require a public hearing every time we add or remove a property from this list?
No, because if we were to require a public hearing, we would have to put in process for that, you know, how to submit, what you have to submit, and, you know, bringing it forward to the board for approval or not.
I only asked that because before it was in the code and you couldn't do anything with it unless you had a public hearing. So this needs to be an amendment because it's really a working document, not in an official code. I mean, it's in the code, but they're not properties that we're doing anything with except identifying them as having some importance to the city of Littleton.
Right. And I think, you know, one of the problems with the list of merit back then was that it had a provision in there that said, if you want to get a building permit, there's going to be a 30-day hold on getting that permit. And properties were put on the list of merit, and there was no public hearing and no paperwork trail for property owners to know about. And they kept getting caught, forgetting they were on the list of merit, forgetting about the 30-day hold. They'd arrive at building department, they want to build a deck over the weekend with their family, and they'd be stopped.
Right.
So this doesn't include any provisions like that. And so this would allow us to put properties on.
And there wasn't a real process in the city to deal with it either back then. I mean, talking almost 20 years ago.
Yes, that's correct.
So now we will have a list that will be shared with all the appropriate departments on these properties that are on the list of merit, knowing that to catch them before something happens.
Mm-hmm.
So my other question had to do with question number 5 of the goal. So if we can go down, I don't think it's on this sheet though, is it? No, it's not on this sheet. It's on the ordinance itself, right? I'll just read it to you. We don't have to pull it up. So what 5 said was, it states to survey those structures which have become eligible for landmarking since the last survey performed in 2001. Does this mean that the board is going to continue to do survey projects in the city? Because the ordinance revisions in 2012 explicitly removed the board from doing survey work. So I just bringing that question up because I don't have a problem with it, because I think the board should be doing surveys, but also groups like Historic Littleton Inc. with the proper survey forms could also do surveys to identify properties that could be added to the legacy list.
Sure, and I think also, you know, surveys that we get grant money for.
Right. And
staff as well. So yeah, the surveys can come from a number of different places, but I can make a note for this, and in working with KKC, make sure that there's the ability for the board to do surveys. I'm not sure why that was removed from the 2012 amendment to the code.
There's a lot of reasons why things were removed in 2012 from the code, but the board should be, who else is going to do the surveys? It's the board that does the surveys, whether we contract it out or what, but I think it's fine to leave it in there. And then the other thing is the legacy list. Is that the list that appears on the GIS database? Is that the official list, or is it separate from the GIS program that Lisa prepared or created?
Yeah, it's all in one. So that Lisa's program is intended to highlight the properties on the Littleton legacy list specifically.
Okay, so I would like to suggest that there is a written list of every property that corresponds with the GIS list, because if properties are added or deleted, there's going to be a time frame lag of adjusting that program. So I'm concerned about the adjustment of the program, particularly if we start doing a lot of surveys. And there's a lot of data required for the GIS program to get in there, which is really nice. But there are some properties that are not in there that are determined significant to Littleton. So we have to make sure we cover every single property that's been done in all these survey forms.
Right. And, as you know, we're holding off on rolling out Lisa's beautiful story map for the time being for a couple of reasons. But this does give us a time, if we do have any time, to continue to build that Littleton legacy list. And so at the time that we are ready to roll it out, it's more complete. And of course, it'll continue to grow over time.
Yeah, I just like the idea of having a separate list that you can scan down before going to the legacy list. And it allows everyone to cross-reference, but it removes the lag, and people look at things a little differently as well. They may want to just scan to see if their property's on a list versus going to it.
Sure.
But, I think the GIS is the place to actually do it, because it's cool. I mean, it really showcases the city. There's no question about it. So those are my only comments on adding it to the ULUC.
Are there any other questions or comments? Lisa, is your hand up?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I was just going to say that I really support having this as a part of the code. I think it gives it stronger legal footing, that it's something that was in the code, even if we don't have public hearings or whatever, when each property is put into the legacy program, it at least has been something that's been reviewed by the public and has gone through the public process to become part of the code. So that makes me feel better about it. And I'll definitely have more comments once we see the actual draft language, but just for providing input now, I think that this, as simple as it can be, to just explain that this is kind of just an administrative program, it's recognition only,
And awareness.
Yeah, awareness and
education.
Trying to be very clear that there are no regulations or stipulations from being on the list. I think just having something in the code that's really clear about that and simple, I think it's important.
And there's strict criteria to make the list. I mean, you have to meet the integrity criteria that we're establishing, right? So if it doesn't meet them, it can't be on the list.
And I think that helps also with making it more. It's not just like one day I decide to put something on the list. Right. I like that house or something. So it's good to have criteria.
Your neighbor is going to tear down the house. I think I'll put it on the list.
Yeah,
no,
right.
Can't do that. No.
So those are my 2 cents.
Okay.
Well, I had some thoughts about surveying. Especially, the Littleton legacy list, as Lisa pointed out, that's a lot of L's, but the purpose is really that education, awareness, and appreciation to cause us, the residents of Littleton to really develop an appreciation for our historic structures. And as the years go by, like now in the very, very short years to come, lots and lots of properties are going to become eligible per se, as far as age goes. And that's a lot of properties to try to survey. And you want, I like the idea of having maybe other groups or other people being able to survey, but you do require consistency, so that you don't wind up with just random people doing surveys. They become very subjective at that point, and that's not what you want for a program like this. And I think that with the survey software that Chris has been working on, you know, if we can have that's very, very standardized, and you know, have volunteer training as they do up in Denver, as Chris does with that program, so that we have a you know, a pretty you know, high level of standardization and you know, consistency in the attention to the survey that's done going forward. Because I think we could, as the years go by, we could be looking at having to do a lot of surveys, and we have to be mindful of that and think about how we're actually going to accomplish that. So yeah.
And I would say along those lines, Kim, that there is a quality control process that happens after the survey is done to look at the data that is gathered by volunteers who are doing survey. So, you know, there's a way to kind of check the data before it goes into the database.
Yeah, that's good and important. And again, you know, that's a step that takes a resource. A human being is going to have to look at that.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, but this is good. I really appreciate and like seeing the focus on the legacy list.
Okay, next item then. Done with Littleton Legacy List.
Again, gotta have the glasses. Yes, okay. Littleton Legacy List. That's
So
the
next item in this, well, it's still within the same agenda item, is just a few more items about the HP code.
yes.
And so the board directed me to speak with the city of Boulder about some of the language and provisions that they had in their code that I had previously pulled out. And so I have done that. Good discussion with them. And the first one was that the board had considered a provision that I put in previous report to require community support for a historic district. And, you know, my assumption was that, well, of course, property owners in the district would have to consent. So they're talking about outside community support, but David Spratlin questioned me on it, and he was the one that was correct on this. What Boulder's talking about here is people within the proposed district. So in terms of adding a requirement for community support, I thought about it personally some more, and I thought that that's maybe something that the staff tells the applicant, hey, if you get more community support for your application, it's going to make it stronger, and that it doesn't have to be a criterion in the code. And so I'm recommending at this time that we don't include that as a requirement for getting a historic district approved.
I would put this off as well, Andrea, until we see what the tire preservation code language is, because it may be covered already within the language of the the master state preservation code that we're looking at adopting.
Not in that one. It's not there. No.
So one thing about this is that everything's always geared for those who object to something that are not supportive of something. There is a trend in the country for people to want to create districts to protect their neighborhoods. And if we don't have a way for someone to say, I want to create a district and start building support, I think it's just more proactive that way instead of asking them to do all the work, right? It's easy to say no. It's hard to say yes. So maybe that's why Boulder decided to do that, because they wanted to give property owners more rights to protect their property.
I think this, yeah, so what was explained to me was they had a very contentious historic district application come through. And many of the property owners there who were within the boundaries said that they didn't really know about it. And they weren't asked if they wanted to be part of it. And it kind of blew up on them.
Well, I know.
This was a number of years ago.
Mhm.
And so rather than adding a provision that, oh, you have to get at least 40, 50, or whatever % of people to consent, they just left it at showing community support. And what they explained to me is the community support doesn't mean things like HLI and neighborhood groups and whatnot. It actually means the property owners within the boundary.
Right. Okay.
Do you think that's clear? Because when I heard you say community support, I wasn't thinking just the property owners in the within the boundaries.
Well, that was my assumption as well, but they explained to me it was actually different. So, I guess I would say they may have room to clarify their code next time they open it up.
Yeah, so I think that really points out the issue with that is that that's a very vague criteria if we can't even understand what they're asking for. So criteria should not be vague, to be clear. So I don't think that we should include something like that. Although, Andrea, I like where you were going of, just telling applicants having community support is a good thing, having the support of the property owners, and making sure that there's notification of everybody that's within post historic district. I think that is a clear way to get at that.
So Andrew, you said David had this correct. So David, could you tell us what your thought was on this when you saw this?
Yeah, I think it was summarized more. I struggle with this as well. And I think I would put myself in an owner's perspective. I'd want to make sure myself and my fellow community members that are part of that district are all in agreements with this and want to move forward, and not an outside group dictating to me as a property owner what should happen with my property. I think that's kind of the thought process I was going through when I first was kind of reading through it.
And Chris, you have something?
I guess a couple things. One is just that in the National Register process, I mean, there's, like a certain amount that you need to have, and there's no magic number or anything, but it's more along the line of, when you do have a district, or even a single property for that matter, that people could send letters of support along with the nomination. And that would show that there was support, and whether that's community support or owner support, it didn't matter. It was just showing support for the importance of the property. But I think it also ties into something I brought up before, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, bring it up now or not, is just that, like, as we look at this district expansion, just making sure that we're letting people know sooner rather than later, so that they do feel involved and they don't feel like Boulder Group, where people didn't feel like they were notified and everything. That, the sooner people are brought into the process, the better.
Yeah, assuming that they read everything that they get. That's the problem with a lot of this. And even the last time I was reading, Andrea sent out 175 notices to property owners in a proposed district, and only 15 people responded back. That's why we have a public process of meetings like this, and people have to also become self-informed. But I just do want to mention one thing that happened with the last administration. They passed wasn't a law, they adjusted the regulation for the National Register to allow a single property owner to be able to totally disregard a proposed district. And the current administration hasn't looked at that in detail yet. I don't know if that applies to just federal properties or not. I think it only applied to federal properties, not private properties. But there was a big move to basically eliminate the ability to create historic districts. Not many people knew about this happening, but CPI knows about it, and the state's historic preservation officers know about it. So there's always a move to reduce the ability to do this than there is to increase it, even though we have incentives.
So what am I hearing here? Are we good with leaving community support out of the code, and it's going to be handled more by staff? And should the board be approached, a board member be approached from somebody, you know, about, hey, how do I get a historic district going? We keep it kind of on that level. It's a good idea, good practice to get community support if you can.
Yeah, I think so. And waiting till we have the entire revised code in front of us, because it's going to be very different than the code we currently are working.
Yep. Okay. All right. So the next one, Boulder has a provision that when the board is reviewing a certificate of appropriateness application, that you can take economic considerations into consider that as part of your criteria. So I said, well, has that been a drawback? Have people come in, you know, with sort of some really difficult situations, and you find yourself using lesser grade materials or a design that's maybe, you know, not what you'd really like to see? But they said no one really ever uses that actually in reality. And it's kind of a different community. In their community, the property owners in historic districts tend to be extremely wealthy and just don't need to deal with that issue. So we got no clarification on that. But I do remember that Kim brought up the idea that, you know, the board already does to some extent consider some economic considerations. And a case in point to that was at the last COA public hearing, the storefront was proposed to be, rather than one large plate of glass, to be broken up so that it could be operable. And in a sense, that was an economic consideration because people who frequent restaurants these days would like fresh air. That makes it more marketable for them. And so that's one example of the board already using economic considerations. So I'll leave it up to you, to the board. Would you like to include that in the criteria? Would you like me to review it with KKC and come up with something in the draft? Or just keep it the way it is?
I don't like it dealing with economic considerations in a certificate of appropriateness. People are coming to us already with a project in mind. And for us to start weighing this is more expensive or less expensive gets into subjective approaches to design. The only place I see where there's economic considerations is when there's demolition or demolition by neglect. That's a whole different ball game, but not where people are proactively coming towards you with a design. Now, like Kim said, like the board can take into consideration other options that may be less expensive or more expensive because we have knowledge about this and we can relay that to the applicant. But the energy efficiency is fine, but not economic considerations.
So that would be economic considerations that, you know, I mean, you could make the argument that it is a, you know, economically prohibitive to use more high quality materials or more historically appropriate materials, and I want to use the less expensive stuff. And I can see a lot of mischief there.
I think there could be some. The biggest place where this would have an impact would be windows, putting in a vinyl window, because it is, 100% cheaper than a really good window.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
But then the property owner sells the property to the next person, and they're stuck with a really bad product. So we don't want to get involved in doing that at all.
Okay.
I can see the mischief going really in bad situations for speculative people, right? So we have to just stay away from that. Our job is to preserve the building based on our criteria and our design guidelines, which are pretty clear what you need to do. So, and let them propose the solutions.
Okay, Andy, you had your hand up?
Well, I was going to say, Littleton does such a great job of offering funding, the Main Street program is at least in this case. And that's what that's for, right? That they can go to that fund if money is an issue. Yeah, I just feel like it adds a whole nother layer that we don't need to get into. I agree with what Rick said.
Yeah, and the code is for the whole city, not Main Street. So whenever we do this, it's applying to every property within the entire city limits, not just downtown.
Okay, then. Any other comments, or the board is good with keeping economic considerations out of the criteria?
Yes, we're good with that.
Okay, and then the last one has to do with energy efficiency, and Boulder said that largely it's for solar panels, but they've noted that solar panels are getting better in design. You can, some solar panels now are actually the same as the roof. It's all in one product. And others are lie flat on a pitched roof. And I think there are even some that lie flat on a flat roof now. Not sure of the quality of those though. And so they don't really see much in that way, but they just tend to, they're always for energy efficiency because that's big for them in that community, energy efficiency. And so they tend to not ever turn anyone down just to try to locate the facilities in the best place possible in order to preserve the view of the building. So, is the board interested in making any sort of, I guess, language in the code that recognizes that energy efficiency or solar panels are acceptable in historic districts? I don't know how strongly you may feel about that issue within a historic district, the context of a historic district.
Andy, is your hand up?
Yeah, wasn't that stated as one of the goals in the comp plan?
Yes.
So I think we need to implement that. And I think at the CPI session that we talked about after that conference, I can't remember now who presented on that, which of you, but like Fort Collins had lots of different examples of how that can be done well and easily without affecting the integrity of the building. And I just feel like, yeah, we've come a long way. I think you set it up well, Andrea. I'm in support of it.
I wonder if it's not something that necessarily goes in the certificate of appropriateness part, but is it more in like the purpose and goals part of the ordinance? Like we are supportive of energy efficient design or things like that. Because I can imagine that there would be many projects that this doesn't apply to. And so having it included in every single certificate of appropriateness analysis, and maybe that's not what you were saying, but maybe it doesn't feel necessary to me to have it as like one of the criteria of the C of A, and maybe it's more just a general guiding purpose statement or something.
I agree with Lisa. It's a case by case basis. The other building codes deal with energy efficiency, and any project that comes to us is already going through the other building codes. They have to meet all the codes for design, and it's up to the owner to be as efficient as they want to be. I think we should do it on a case by case basis. And I only say that because the technology is changing so fast. You can improve something today and it'll be obsolete in a year. And we're seeing that with solar panels right now. They're getting so much smaller. They're building them into different materials. It should just be a goal for society anyway to reduce energy, right? So instead of making a statement and just see. We do have the setbacks on roof stuff, mechanical equipment and all that. It could fall into that criteria.
And I think it's also important, to recognize that, in historic districts, you don't want to compromise the historic district just to wring the maximum energy efficiency out of it. Or else you would be taking out a lot of windows and, making them much, much smaller.
I'm more concerned about mirrored glass than I would be about a solar panel, right?
And a solar panel is always removable as technology increases.
Right. And it's usually on the roof too. Usually you can't see it, so.
Okay then, all right, that's good direction. So that's it for the HP code. And then the next time the HP board will see the code is when we have a draft available. And we'll be looking to schedule something for the board to look at all of that.
Are you planning like a month for us to review it, Andrea?
Yeah, there will be time to review. Well, we just don't have a schedule together yet, but there will be plenty of time to review it. And just a matter of figuring out where it best fits in with other board business that we have.
And that's all proposed to be approved before November, right? The ULUC, all done by November?
Yes. So the draft is going to come out in the beginning of June, and there will be a couple of months for the public and the boards and the council and the staff to review it, and it will be scheduled for public hearings beginning September and October.
The same time as our public hearings.
That's right. It's gonna get very busy, both the code and the downtown historic district in the fall.
Yeah.
It'll be very busy.
Okay.
All right, Andrea, are you finished with this last agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yes, Chris.
I was just going to say, Andrea, the issue I emailed you about with Geneva House, is that something you were going to talk about, or?
Yes. Do we have items from staff on the agenda for tonight, Kim?
Actually, we don't.
Okay.
But
that's why I was asking, because I didn't see anything.
And other items. So,
well, yeah, I think we're looking at, I didn't realize that we had started immediately, but we're looking at having items from staff and the board only when the board has a regular meeting and not a study session.
Okay.
But since we're talking about it, I'll just briefly speak about it. Chris brought this to my attention. She was reading the Littleton report, and there was a little article about Geneva Lodge. That's the historic building next to the city building, where it used to be a retirement hall, and then now it belongs to the city. And it's been leased out to various architectural firms over the years, but now it's going to be used for city offices. The Public Works Department is going to be moving some of their offices into that building. And there need to be some improvements. And primarily, to shore up the building, but also to add ADA requirements, some ramps and accessibility for the public to be able to get in there. And so the maintenance department, I've talked with them a couple of times about this. They are looking at an SHF grant, but down the line. The article implied that they were already writing it and already working with HPB. So just to clarify, that's down the road, down the future. And there may also likely be a certificate of appropriateness application coming up for that building for some exterior modifications.
Is that building locally landmarked?
It's locally landmarked and it's a national landmark as well.
National Register?
National Register.
Yes, National Register, sorry.
Okay, I was gonna say, because if they're applying for a grant, they need to be designated, so, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you. It was weird to, get this email, Littleton Online, and I always, skim through and look at all the articles, and it's like, working with the HPB, and I'm like, really? Because I'm on the HPB and I've seen nothing about this. So I was just kind of confused as to like, where were they in this process? If they're working with us and none of us have heard anything, so.
That's not good.
Well, they might have just
predicting an accurate future. They will be working with the HPB.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, I'm glad they know they need to come into, and talk with us, and they want to work with us on everything. But I was just like, wow, I've not missed a meeting, and I've not heard a word about this. So I thought maybe I missed something. So I sent an email to Andrea, just kind of saying, hey, what's going on with this?
Yeah, even though it's the city, they're going to follow procedures just like anyone else.
Well, and I'm still learning all of the ins and outs of like when to bring something up and when not to, and all that kind of stuff. So as I pointed out to Ashley, like I never got an orientation, so I don't know. I didn't realize there were different meeting types. And I'm used to, how Aurora did things. They were not quasi-governmental. And so I wasn't familiar with the fact of, like if comments are asked for, then I'm going to ask a question or bring something up, not realizing that certain things have to be on the agenda and stuff. So I'm still learning all of that.
Well, we all are. So
I saw that in the report too. And at the Historic Littleton Inc. meeting yesterday, someone also brought it up because they saw it in the Littleton report. And Geneva Lodge was the first property that Historic Littleton Inc. got designated almost 30 years ago. So those people will be watching too.
Well, we should pass it along to the editor of the Littleton report that people are actually reading that Littleton report. So that's a positive thing. And regarding just training and things along those lines, I believe, we will be receiving some board training as just part of a normal course of business, as we seat a new board, which is coming up all too quickly. Ashley, did you want to add anything?
Yep, I can jump in there just with another staff update. It's on our agenda to do the full HPB training at the next meeting. As you can imagine, just from what we've talked about tonight, it's going to be a busy month. We have that continued COA, we have elections, and then the plan is to follow it with a study session to do the training, and then some of the other stuff you guys have been discussing today. So we're gonna have to work that out as staff, how we wanna do that. But our plan is to train all boards in April when they do their elections with all the new board members coming on. What the plan is right now is to kind of put together and update our boards and commissions handbook that the city has that hasn't been done since 2013, I believe. So we're getting ready to push that out, and we'll send it to all boards ahead of time. You guys can review that prior to the meeting. And then each individual board meeting will kind of really focus on board specific training, and can answer any questions at that time as well. So that's the plan right now. You guys have the busiest schedule, I think, other than council. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah. Chris, question?
A question for Ashley.
Sure.
Is it something that, the training, like, is that something that has to be public?
Yeah, we typically, I mean, just for scheduling purpose for you guys to be able to have everyone there and meeting and discussing, I think that's how it's routinely been done. I know previously they tried to get all boards together and bring in outside counsel to do this, and it was hard to get very much attendance because it wasn't on the regularly scheduled nights. So it's something we can look at with the schedule, but I know even adding dates is pretty difficult right now. So
Okay.
right
I was
now
thinking
it's
of it.
planned in a study session.
Okay. I was just thinking of it from the perspective of everything we've talked about tonight. Like, okay, that's at the April meeting. That's at the April meeting. Like,
Yep.
it's going to be like a 5-hour meeting at the rate we're going. So it's just like, I wonder if like the training was scheduled another time and it didn't have to be like broadcast to the public.
And it's something we've discussed, and I can tell you staff and myself and the city clerk all meet weekly about agendas for various boards. And so the last time we really met was before the snowstorm. So it may be something we have to rediscuss. But right now it's tentatively on the agenda because we want to get all boards trained that month. So
in other words, have snacks close by and lots of water because it's going to be a power session.
And yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. The legal stuff is pretty dry. Sorry now.
Especially at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, we're all in our pajamas. But
I'll forgive you if you send chocolate from the chocolate therapist.
Yes. Fair enough.
But and you know, with any luck, you know, the city is moving forward with getting us back together so that we can be having in-person meetings in the newly revamped chambers. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, it's been fabulous to meet on Zoom. We're all very grateful for this, and there's so much work that's gone into it, and it's really worked very well. And, but, you know, it's just in person is better. It is kind of awkward when you're doing this via Zoom, because you just don't have visual cues from a room full of people. So that'll be very nice, and our meetings will be less awkward, I think, going forward into the future as well. So let's just wrap up what the deliverables are out of this meeting. We've got everybody taking the homework assignment, which has been discussed and was also sent out in the packet. And so we should review our buildings and do our discussing and things like that and thinking about it. And we will, you know, bring it to the April meeting on the 19th and then have a discussion. And then regarding the grant program, Lisa and I, along with Andrea, will be working on that literally within the next 10 days. Wrapping that up, excuse me, doing any review and wrap up of that. And that will be sent out via email to board members to take a look at. Is that right, Andrea?
Yep.
And then please respond very quickly, and we'll put that in the email also. And so that should be pretty much a done deal before the April 19 meeting. The hope is to get it out the door before the April 19 meeting. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So that will not be something that's being reviewed on the agenda in April 19. So, and then next up, we didn't mention this tonight, but Amy and I are going to be working on themes. And Amy, we'll get together schedule-wise and see when Andrea is available to make sure we understand exactly what Andrea is looking for.
All that.
So is there any other discussion or anything else that needs to come to the fore before we say goodnight? Yes, Andrea.
Yeah, I'd like to say that we have 2 board members for whom it's their last meeting tonight. Andy Hill and David Spratlin. And so just thank you so much for serving on the board, and both of you were great and we'll really miss you. Best of luck in how you spend your third Monday evenings moving forward.
We will miss you. And
will miss
I
you.
second that thank you so much for your contribution. You both brought wonderful insights to the board over the terms of your service. Your professional backgrounds just brought so much, again, insight and knowledge. And thank you for generously sharing that with us. And unfortunately, since we are still kind of in lockdown mode, normally we would go out and raise a glass to you at one of Littleton's fine establishments, but we'll have to put that off for now. But just go with our sincere appreciation and thanks.
It's the first time in my life I've been on a board for a whole year and never was in the same room with everybody.
I know.
Weird.
I say we do something this summer when it's, we can sit out on a patio somewhere and all convene.
I agree. And Michael and I were laughing, just kind of walking around on one of the nice days that we had before the blizzard, was that when things just kind of open up a little bit more, we are going out several nights a week and we are only going to Littleton restaurants.
I'm looking forward to the closing of Main Street in the weekends like you did.
Yes.
That would be even more successful after
that
COVID.
Was so much fun.
I loved it.
All right.
Well, thank you, Andy and David. Sorry I didn't really get to interact with you a whole lot in person, but I really enjoyed having you guys on the board, and I wish you the best.
Well, thank you. I'll miss this crew. I love the staff, so professional, and you guys have been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot, so I'll miss it, but thank you.
We hope to see you during the public hearings on the district.
And David, it's all right. You've got your boys, and I always think of them in sports, and I'm seeing that spring sports are starting up. Are you starting to get really busy with them?
Well, thankfully this snow's put a little bit of a slow start to it right now. I'm okay with that right now. But also just want to thank the whole board. I've learned a lot from working with all of you over the past, and past board members as well over the past 2 terms. And staff as well, very professional, and hopefully I look forward to working with you on other projects in the future. So thank you all very much. It's been a wonderful
Welcome,
time.
David.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, just thank you to everyone. It was so nice to see everyone. And thank you, Andrea, for wow, all of the work that went into this session. And I guess see you around campus. So we are adjourned, and good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.